and girls, everyone. It's very inclusive here. I'm very happy to be here. How were the sessions so far today? You guys like it? Okay, well, I hope I'm not going to repeat too much of the content you guys heard already, because we had some great speakers in the morning. So, first of all, for the people that are sitting in the front, I put some t-shirts on the table, and the reason for that is I'm not a fantastic speaker, and they gave me feedback forms, so I'm just going to bribe you guys. So the t-shirts are for people that actually participate in the session. I also put a trip hazard here for myself, so if I'm about to trip, just shout and I'll know not to trip. I also have some stickers for you people who like to put stickers on your laptop. Not sure, but they're in the front. Little thing. Click. Presenter view, always nice. Let me fix that one. Sometimes presenter view is very good, and other times I wish it didn't exist.
Yeah.
Where is the button? Slideshow, presenter view.
Last guy had issues in him as well.
There we go. So, click. Come on. F5. Come on. You can do this. Play. This is my first time using PowerPoint, and it's not not going very well. Let's see. Let's try it again. Okay, I'm going to just click to the slides. I don't have that many slides. So we're here to switching. Yeah. Okay. So my name is Jaap. I do a lot with PowerShell. PowerShell is my favorite topic to be talking about. I wanted to use my mouse for clicking around, but yeah, obviously I couldn't figure it out. So I'm better at PowerShell, really. So a little bit about myself. I'm a PowerShell MVP, or at least I used to be a PowerShell MVP when that was still a thing. Nowadays I'm a CDM MVP, like many others that are walking around and speaking here. I see some people in the room that are in the same position as me. So welcome. I do tech marketing at Rubrik. If you couldn't tell by my shirt, that's the company I work for. They were friendly enough to send me here, so thanks to them. We have some stickers of them, and I have some t-shirts. And the t-shirts, unfortunately, I just got back from the States, and I gave away all the extra large and extra large over there. So I'm sure you guys will be fine with medium, right? Some of you will be. Otherwise, you can give it away to whoever can actually fit it. I do a lot of vlogging. I do speaking about PowerShell, and today we're going to talk about following. So we're going to talk about PowerShell. Why are we using PowerShell? What do we want to do with PowerShell? Why would you use objects in PowerShell? A bit about formatting, like how can you format your code? How can you make it look pretty? And what are the good ways of doing that? And we'll talk about performance, because performance is an important thing. I often see complaints when I'm browsing the internet, like, oh, PowerShell is so slow, we should just be using Python, or why would anyone even care about PowerShell because Bash is awesome. Well, Bash is kind of nice, but I also like PowerShell. And the best thing about Bash is that you can start PowerShell in Bash. So. Got some people on my side, that's good. Never try that at a Linux con, you're done. Or just make sure you don't have time for Q&A, but they'll still destroy you. Demos, and because the title is unicorns, there will be a lot of unicorns, and that's actually how we're going to give away the shirts. Whoever shouts out true or false first, or whoever I want to give the shirt to, will depend. We'll get the shirt. There's a couple of questions just littered around the session, so it will. The slide indicates that there's going to be a question. Will look like this. Switch. So here's a statement. Unicorns do not have wings. Is that true or false? True. Yeah, that's true. What is the one called that does have wings and is also kind of a white horse? Pegasus. Oh, okay, there you go. Actually, I had to Google a lot of this unicorn stuff because not too happy. Yeah, I'm just covering up. I'm a huge fan. So let's get started. So the PowerShell language. Does anyone know how long PowerShell has been around? Has it been mentioned already? I see
2005.
2005. Actually, it was released in 2006, so it's almost been around for 12 years because it was released in November.
It was internally at Microsoft in 2005.
Oh yeah. Well, okay.
That's right, that's right.
Okay, well, I did not have access to it in 2005, but yeah, 13 years old, and developments or the idea came to be in 2001. So a couple of components about the a couple of things about the PowerShell language. Has everyone heard of the Model Manifesto? So there was a document written by Jeffrey Snover. Jeffrey Snover is the friendly godfather of PowerShell, who always shows up at conferences, very approachable. He wrote a document in which he outlined his plan for PowerShell and what the grand idea behind PowerShell, in his opinion, should be. Other things I have here. So we have Windows PowerShell. I'll be doing all my demos today in Windows PowerShell because I assume most of you are still using. How many of you are using PowerShell Core? Show of hands. Okay. How many are primarily using PowerShell Core? Yeah, there we go. Like people use it, but they don't use it as their primary PowerShell tool. I saw a couple of heads nodding back and forth. So PowerShell Core is new development in PowerShell. So 2 years ago, PowerShell was open sourced, and as part of that, PowerShell was also available on all platforms. So you can now run PowerShell on top of Linux, on top of Mac OS, on top of Raspberry Pi. You can run PowerShell everywhere now. So that's really cool. But the downside of it was when PowerShell 6 was finally released and out of beta, we saw that we could actually not run most of the Windows commands. And some things kind of make sense. You cannot do get event log on a Linux box or get servers because it simply does not exist. But for example, new AD user, it would be kind of cool if you could just run that on Linux because it might be on the same network. So why wouldn't it be able to create an AD user? So that's actually something that they also noticed at the PowerShell team, and they've been actively working on backporting the existing modules, the existing Microsoft modules, and making them compatible with PowerShell Core. Does anyone have an idea what the percentage of modules is, the Microsoft modules that is now compatible with PowerShell Core?
70%.
I heard 70%. Anyone else? No, so the number I heard last was 60%, so that's actually quite big. And if you compare that to how it was when PowerShell Core was just released, it was 10%, 20%. Most of the stuff wasn't really working on PowerShell Core. So I think PowerShell 6.1 was released in June, and I think that was the first version that you could. I think this is the version that should have been PowerShell 6, because now you can actually run most of your Windows commands. There's also a module that allows you to use the Windows PowerShell modules that are not compatible with PowerShell Core, and you run them by calling Windows PowerShell from PowerShell Core. Does that make sense? So what you can do if you're in Windows PowerShell and you have PowerShell 6 installed, you can write pwsh and you start PowerShell 6. You can do the same from PowerShell 6. You can call the PowerShell 5 executable. Cool. So what else do we have in the world of PowerShell? So PowerShell is more than the language. Do we actually have anyone in the room that was present for this picture? No? No one went to Microsoft Ignite? Oh, that's too bad. That would have been a t-shirt, but yeah, now it's my t-shirt. So PowerShell is more than just a language. I mean, you guys know it. You're part of the PowerShell community. You're here today at PS Day. But there's also several worldwide conferences. So what we have the PowerShell and DevOps Summit. That's the American edition. We have the PowerShell Conference Europe. Was just a couple months ago, and it's coming up in June 2019. And we have the PowerShell Conference Asia. And the PowerShell Conference Asia is going to happen next week, actually. I'm flying there on Sunday, so jet lag, nice. And the nice thing about the PowerShell community is that people are very willing to share their knowledge. That's also how I got started with PowerShell. For me, I went to the forums, I tried to find out how to actually run the PowerShell code. I was utterly confused because I was obviously not going to read the manual. I was not going to read a book about PowerShell. I mean, who does that? I've done it by now, and I probably should have started with that because I definitely wasted half a year just trying to understand what those objects were. So, moving on. So what we want to do with PowerShell, we want to automate all the things. Because, well, I don't want to do the same job over and over again. That's how I started with scripting and automation. I just want to make sure that whatever I do once, if I can automate it, then I will automate it using PowerShell. So, how can we get there? How do we get started? So I think there's a couple of stages where you can go when you're scripting. You can write a script file, which is basically just a sequential execution of a number of commands. Then you use PowerShell as some kind of a glorified batch scripting engine. You can just put a couple of commands in there. You can make very nice scripts. They can be very powerful. It's not making use of the full capability of the language. Next up, we create functions. If you know how to make a function, creating an advanced function is not that much more complicated. I mean, the only thing you need to do to create an advanced function is put a tag at the top. Does anyone know what a tag is?
Commandlet binding.
Commandlet binding, yes. Okay, very good. You can package those in modules, and I think the last step is to publish it to the PowerShell gallery, put it up on GitHub, tweet it out, throw it on Facebook, throw it on LinkedIn, get other people involved, make sure other people know that whatever you've written is out there. So that is that's the different stages of creating PowerShell code. What level are most people at here? Who has created a module? Most people, nice. Okay, and uploaded it to the PowerShell gallery? Okay, so a lot less people. For the people that didn't upload it, I won't call names, and you're not on video. Why did you not upload it to the PowerShell gallery? Could you not do it, or did you think it was not good enough?
Didn't have permissions to do it from work.
Yeah, that's a very common one indeed. So not having the permissions from work, yeah, I've been there. My workaround has been, depends on which country you're in. What I do is, whatever I want to work on at work, I just start it off when I'm at home, and then I upload it, and I just do the bare bones, and then I say, hey, there's this thing up on the internet that I'm already working on. Would you like me to continue working on this one and use it internally? Might work, but depends on the company you work for. Some companies have very strict guidelines. Anything you do, whether at home or at work, is part. No. I used to work for a financial institution, so I know how it is. So, moving on. I would have really liked my clicker now. So the other thing is the part of it didn't move. Uh-oh. There we go. Share your success. Show it to the world. And the reason I picked Sauron's Eye, I mean, the moment you put it online, you put a lot of pressure on yourself, especially the first time you're doing it. First time I put some code online, I thought everyone is going to destroy it. But the reality is, most people will probably not even see it unless you actively promote that it's out there. So it's not as scary as you would think, and I would definitely encourage everyone here to do it. If you have some code that might be useful to others, just put it online. Even if you're not writing modules, you can also upload your scripts to the PowerShell gallery and GitHub. It's a good resource for others, and it's also a good way to get some feedback from other people. Sometimes I get people coming, why didn't you do that? And I'm like, I didn't know that was possible. Cool. So, objects, why? Well, as most people have already written modules, I think we can go over this section of this presentation rather quickly. Most of you have already used objects, but I'll still talk about why structured objects are useful and what we can do with it. So PowerShell is an object-based scripting language, which means that anything we work with is not just plain text like you have in the traditional shells, like you have in the command prompt in Bash. You're always working with text and you kind of have to parse it with regular expressions. I'm not saying regular expressions are bad, but they're finicky, and if anything in your source data changes, then everything breaks. Which is very nice if you want to keep a job, because you have to keep updating your tools whenever a tool changes. You update your scripts when a tool changes. But it's not the kind of work I would like to be doing. We like to automate things, and we want to make sure we don't have to do the same thing. And if you're just updating scripts, you're just doing the same thing anyway. And you can send all those objects through the pipeline. So pipelining is a big thing, and everything you put through there will be an object as well. Cool. How about some code? Yes? Cool. The trip hazard is going good so far. Let's see how far I can make it. Does it actually switch over? Of course it does not. Okay, that's curious. How about if I do this? No. Maybe it's extended. Oh yeah, it's extended. Here we go. Cool. So, first of all, let's just do a simple string. I'll sit down and make it easy on myself, save my legs a little bit. So, creating a string in PowerShell is very easy. I call it string here, but obviously I could call it anything I want to. I can store it in a variable, call it again. I can use the +is addition to add to the string. In the meantime, I'll open up sys internals for the people in the back. There we go, zoom it. Is it big enough in the back? Yeah? Okay, cool. Then I'll just use zoom it to highlight things. Other thing is, what we can do, get process will get all the processes, very simple command. I'll be using that more often. So if I run this, we get a whole list of processes. If we want to store that, we can just put it in a variable again. If you take a look at the type, so we use getType, we can see it's a system object, and we have the square brackets, which indicates that we're dealing with an array. If we look at the base type, we can indeed see we have an array. So over here. Cool, simple so far. So if we want to create a bit more complex of an object, we can create a hash table. And to create a hash table, we use the add curly bracket notation. We can make a hash table, store it like this, and then we can call it again. And since most of you are already aware, I won't go in why it isn't ordered, because it's a hash table and they are not ordered by default. We have arrays, so if you want to create an array of strings, we can do it like this. And if we now call it again, we can see we have 2 strings in our array. Easy so far? Not really hard, right? Cool. Now let's see. So creating a custom object. So this is a notation I still see quite often online. Does anyone use new object to create PowerShell custom objects? Yeah? Okay. What's the reason you use new object for it?
Unawareness of other options.
Okay, fantastic. No, that's good to hear, because we're here to learn new things. So cool. So new object was indeed the preferred way of creating PowerShell objects in PowerShell version 1, PowerShell version 2, because there was no other way of creating objects. And the way it worked was, you first create a hash table. In this case, I do an ordered hash table. Note that it's only available in PowerShell version 3. I create a property 1, and I put hello in there. So now if we want to create an object, we can do new object. We say type name is a PS custom object, and we put the ordered hash in there. So now we have an object, and then often what I see, what I've seen online is that when people create a PowerShell custom object, and afterwards they start using add member to add additional properties or even methods to an object. The downside of this is every time you create an object, if you're doing this in a loop, it's going to eat up a lot of your processing time, because you create an object, and then you update the object, you update the object, you update the object. And it's not a very efficient process to create it like that. So my recommendation, if you're using new object for backward compatibility reasons, which in my opinion is the only reason why you would use it. So if you have to write for PowerShell version 2, so if you need to be compatible with Server 2003, is anyone still running Server 2003 in production? Okay, I'm going to pretend I didn't see any hands right now, so let's continue. Last year I deployed Server 2000, so no, I'm very proud of that. I did not feel dirty at all after doing that. And the reason for this was, we had documentation from 2001 which explicitly stated it needed to be Server 2000. So there you go. That's IT for you. I had a very happy customer. They were very happy with their server. They were a bit disappointed that all the PowerShell monitoring scripts did not run. Cool. So another way of creating PowerShell objects is to just use the type accelerator that I mentioned before. So that's PS custom object. Then once again you can specify a hash table, and the hash table you specify after PS custom object, it will be an ordered hash table. So if you specify it this way, property 1 will actually be the first property of your PowerShell custom object. So you don't have to explicitly state it's ordered, because it will implicitly do that for you. Does that make sense? So let's create this object. Here we go. So we can see property 1, date and text all show up in the order we wanted them to show up. So now that we have a PowerShell custom object, when we export this, we can turn this into a CSV file. So if I now do...
Good question, yeah?
Yeah.
Is there any functional performance reason that the two of them, is it just because you use it because it's the newer, more preferred way of doing it, or is it actually a faster, better way of doing it like that? So it's actually doing the same thing, I mean.
Yeah, so you mean, so the question was, why is it the preferred way to use the PS custom object type accelerator? The reason this is the preferred way is because A, it's faster, it implicitly assumes you want to have an ordered hash table, and you don't have to work with add member. So if you use add member, then every time you go either to the pipeline or you execute add member to add properties to it. And I see before I go on, does it answer your question?
It does, yeah, but yes, it does, because it's faster and it's ordered, but you'd still ask occasionally, if you were deriving, say, a script property or something like that, you would still use add member in there, wouldn't you?
So
you wanted to tag the column on the end of it from derived, you'd still need to use add member for that, wouldn't you? There are still cases for add member.
So the question is, are there still scenarios in which you would want to use add member? There might be cases that you want to use add member, but there's also different ways of adding properties to an existing, there's different approaches to that as well, because you can use a select object with calculated properties, and you can just add an object to it, add a property or a number of properties to it. Or a different way would be to do for each item and then create a new PS custom object. But it will really depend on the scenario and your coding preferences. And I've had another question there.
Yeah, but actually a follow-up question on this question. If you create the hash table, like if you finish it and then create the object once, is that like less? Does this perform worse than like this?
So the question is, if you first create a hash table and then put it into a PS custom object, is the performance less? Slightly, but it does not really matter. you don't have to guide it exactly like this.
But the point you're trying to bring up is that add member is like the performance killer.
Add member is the performance killer. That's correct.
It's not really a question, but the whole performance thing with the PS Custom Objects Accelerator, the absolute fastest way is to use the new accelerator and declare that object, and that's the now preferred fastest way.
Yeah, so the comment that was made, because I haven't been throwing the speaker around yet, so I'll just repeat your questions until we get to the actual Q&A. So the comment that was made, if you use the new method on PS Custom Object, that is even faster. That is correct, but it looks a bit ugly. So what I've done here, I created an object and I put it in a CSV, and then we can use II. What does II stand for? Invoke item, yes. So invoke item is the same as double clicking on whatever you put in there in your PowerShell code. So invoke item in this case, you double click a CSV and it opens as an Excel file. I didn't use no type information, so we get the ugly header at the top. And obviously, if you create a single object in your code, it doesn't really matter which one of the methods you use. It's a personal preference as well. But if you create a lot of objects, then there will be a performance difference with the different methods. And then I'll do this one. Oh. So let's continue here. Now my clicker should work. So the statement is, unicorns exist in Asian mythology. True or false? First one to call it. I heard false. False? Okay. So this creature, either called a qilin or a kirin, kirin is also a Japanese bear, it's also featured on that, is often considered to be the unicorn, but if it's a true unicorn, I don't really know, since you were the only one or the first one to call it. Do you wear medium?
Yeah, why not?
There you go. If you come at the end, we'll get you a shirt, and this is what you got. Show it on camera. So it's definitely not related to any kind of comic book. Absolutely not, because that might violate a trademark or copyright or whatever that's called. Cool. So that was the first one. We got a couple more. Performance. So we already talked a little bit about performance, but we're going to talk about performance more. So what kind of things can we do if we want to make it faster? There's a number of things. We can avoid the pipeline, because a pipeline it's a nice feature, but if you can avoid it, it's going to be faster. So the add member example for creating objects, often what you see, and what I also showed in my code before, is you do object and then pipe it to add member. It would already be faster if you do add member and then dash input object and put your object in there. That's already a faster way of executing it. So there's other ways of avoiding the pipeline. There's also different ways of iterating through objects, and we'll go over a couple of them and take a look at the performance differences. Regular expressions, I already expressed my love for them before, can save you quite a bit of time. Best example I have for regular expressions saving the day. Do you guys ever have that your colleagues come up to you and ask you, hey, my script is a little bit slow? How many people have that? No one? Okay, well, I guess I'm the unicorn. So I had a colleague come up to me, my script is a little bit slow, so I asked him, like, how slow is your script? And he says, well, sometimes it takes like 14 hours, other times it takes 22 hours. I was like, yeah, that's probably a little bit too long. And I was already in my head trying to figure out what he was doing. I thought, well, maybe he's iterating to all systems in AD and trying to execute commands and doing it sequentially so it times out and it takes a lot of time. Nope. he was parsing a website, and it was a monitoring website. So there were a lot of tables on there, and the way he was iterating through it. Are you guys familiar with invoke web request? So invoke web request uses Internet Explorer to do the parsing of whatever HTML comes in there. So if you ever run invoke web request and you've never run Internet Explorer, which is everyone's favorite browser, it will error out, and you won't be able to use the advanced parsing. You can only use basic parsing. Anyway, if you use that to iterate through the tables in an HTML document, I didn't know that because I never did that either. It took about 3 seconds to go from one column to the other column, and he had a couple thousand columns. So yeah, then depending on how busy the server was, sometimes 14 hours, other times 22 hours. It's like, what kind of data do you want out of it? It turned out that he was just looking for a specific statement, so took a look at the HTML, figured out a regular expression. If you haven't worked with regular expressions yet, there's a lot of cool tutorials, and there's a lot of talks available online about regular expressions as well, so I won't go too deep. I created a regular expression, just a single line of code. He had a script that was it 60, 70 lines, so it wasn't that big, it was just very slow. I replaced it with 5 lines of code, which included a rather large regular expression, and anyone want to venture a guess? You get a t-shirt if you guess correctly. Whoever is closest gets a t-shirt. How long did it take after?
5 seconds, probably.
5 seconds, few seconds, anyone else? 10? What?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. I heard 10, it was actually 22 seconds. So we went from 22 hours to 22 seconds. It was a rather large HTML file, so the regular expression also took some time, but definitely not 22 hours. Who was it, by the way, who said 10 seconds? Okay, well, it's already 2 t-shirts there. And I'm just going to say this to everyone, you look like you can wear a medium, so. Cool. The other thing is filter on the left. For those of you who haven't heard this one before, so this is also avoiding the pipeline. So filter on the left, some commands have a filter parameter or an exclusion or an inclusion parameter in the command. Use that if it's there, because if you have to use the pipeline, at least you limit the amount of objects going to the pipeline, the execution will be faster. Makes sense, right? The other thing is you can use .NET objects. So if you're a developer and you're using PowerShell, then you probably know the .NET objects already. Actually, when I gave my first PowerShell training, I had a couple of developers, and they were teaching me things about the objects I had in PowerShell. So that's really cool because it brings operational people and developers together, and you can both leverage the strengths of the language and do with it what you want. And the last one is parallel execution. That's also why I told this story. At first I thought, well, maybe he's trying to iterate to a list of a lot of servers. So if you're trying to query a lot of servers, a lot of databases, maybe a very big file system, it might be better to do a parallel execution. So if you have a big file share, maybe split it up in like 10 similar sized chunks and run against that. Cool? A baby unicorn is called a puppy. True or false? I don't know who the first one was. Can anyone call who the first one was? Or just raise your hand if you were the first.
She was next.
Yeah, you were first? There you go. So it was false. Do you know what it is? For bonus points, you get a sticker. I obviously know this because I know everything. It's called a sparkle. Of course. I mean, it's in the picture, it sparkles, come on. Cool, we'll do some more code. So performance. So I already mentioned that avoiding the pipeline can be a good thing. Well, let's see how good it actually is if we avoid the pipeline. So I have a bit of code here. This is the important part of all this code. It's going to calculate 2 to the power of 10. So that's 1 kilobyte. So not a very hard calculation for a system to do, but we're going to make it do 100,000 times. So it will take a bit of time, if only because it has to iterate through the loop 100,000 times. So we do this so we can see the performance difference between all the different loops. And this is only really important if you're working with very large data sets in which the loop creation is, the loop execution time actually matters. Because if you're going to be doing something in your loop that already takes 5 seconds, well, it doesn't really matter which loop you use then, but still something to be aware of. So the first one, we use the for statement. So it's for I is 0, and if it's less than 100,000, then it will keep on going and do an increment. So let's see how long this one takes. Actually, I'll execute all of them at the same time. The next one is for each object. So this one uses the pipeline. So this one will be the host. Yes. After that one, we have for each. So this for each keyword. You can also use this to create loops in PowerShell. And the last one is a new one in PowerShell 5. You can use the for each statement or also the where statement on any collection you have in PowerShell. So does anyone want to guess which one is going to be the fastest?
The method. Say the method. The last one.
The last one? Yeah, it would have been nice if that was the case, because that's definitely the best one to... So we'll execute it, and we'll get the output in here once it completes. So there we go. So we can see the for loop is quite fast. For each object has no idea what it's doing. It just lost itself while it was executing. I don't know why it had to take 5 seconds. Then we have the for each. That one's the fastest. And then we have dot for each. And I would recommend using that one unless you're doing very hard mathematical equations or performance is the most important thing. Because the downside of using both the for loop and the for each keyword, you can't use it, you can't pipe whatever kind of data you have into the next part of the pipeline. Because if you use the for each keyword and you try to pipe it into something, it will say there's no data available because there is no data. There are some workarounds for that, but what it comes down to is you have to wait for the entire execution to finish before it will move on to the second part of the pipeline. So depending on your workload, the for each keyword is the fastest, but I would use the for each method. Yeah?
So why are the two things that are both not using the pipeline so vastly different then?
It also depends on which PowerShell version you run it on, but the main difference is because under the hood, the for each array method is a more expensive operation in PowerShell. And why it is more expensive, I haven't looked at the source code, what the main difference is. But we can actually run this in PowerShell 6. I said I wouldn't do any demos in PowerShell 6, but yeah, who am I? I don't even believe myself, guys. There we go. Let's see if it gets faster. Nope. Well, it is actually faster across the board. So we can see, if we compare that to the other output, so you can see that even using the pipeline is only takes 1 second instead of 5 seconds. For each is even faster. So there are definitely performance improvements when using PowerShell 6, but for each, unfortunately, stays the fastest one. So working with file systems. Have you ever used PowerShell to iterate to a big file system? Did you ever try to run it against a big file server? See a lot of people, yes. It gets very slow, and it has gotten better with new versions of PowerShell. But the problem in the end is PowerShell is creating objects, and a file or a directory object has a lot of data, because when PowerShell retrieves information about the file, it doesn't just get the file name and the size. It gets the file name, the size, the attributes, the version information, all that stuff, and you end up with a very big object. And even if the PowerShell language is very efficient with what it does with the object, it still has to be stored in memory. And if you have a big enough data set, well, you're going to hit the memory ceiling at some point, and then it starts caching, writing to disk, writing to page file, and it starts to slow down. So I was running this in production, and I was working with file servers that were many, many, many terabytes, and we needed to know how big, what the file structure looked like, and how big the folders were. So at first we just use get ChildItem. You can just recurse through it. You can only select the files, and you can then use measure object. Is everyone familiar with measure object? You can use measure object to calculate the sum of all the length. Yes, question?
I thought you just said you only wish to files. Does that mean it should be file instead of force?
No, force. So the question is, should it be file instead of force? No, because you could specify the file parameter, but this particular one was written for PowerShell version 2. So in PowerShell version 2 you didn't have the files parameter yet. But you can still sum up the length of all the directories, because directories don't have length. So if they don't have length, it doesn't matter. And for bonus points, does anyone know what the force parameter does in get ChildItem?
It's hidden stuff.
Hidden system.
Yep, hidden and system. So you also get the hidden and system object.
You'll get a sticker though.
Absolutely. Very nice sticker. The other way is to use there. We have a bit of a problem if we want to call there in PowerShell, because there is also an alias for get ChildItem. So if we want to call it, we actually have to start the command prompt, which is a bit expensive, because why would you open up the command prompt when you're already in PowerShell? So we can also use that, and we use the split operator to get the data we want. And then the last one, and my favorite one when I was still doing file server migrations, Robocopy. Anyone who doesn't know what Robocopy does, Robocopy is a file copy tool. It's really fast, it's really efficient, and you can also use it to calculate the size of a file set. So I'll use the 3 different methods, and I'm going to sum up all my files in ctemp. And I made sure ctemp was a little bit big. I don't know how big I made it. I think I mainly put small files in there. Let's take a look. There we go. 7,000, 10,000, 12,000 files. So it's not a huge file set, but it's big enough so we can see the difference between the execution times. So get ChildItem. So my plan was to execute this in a different PowerShell console, but I didn't. So you can see it's 1.9 gigabytes, and then we use there. You can already see this one will execute a lot faster. We also get 1.9 gigabytes, and now we run Robocopy, and also 1.9 gigabytes. There's a little bit of a rounding thing going on with Robocopy, but you can calculate the file size like this. So if we want to measure the performance, we use measure command again. It's really nice to measure different performance. And I'll copy paste it in here now, so you can see the results of this. So we can see if we use PowerShell, it takes almost 4 seconds to do it. If we use there, it's half of that. But part of that is the fact it has to start up CMD. The reason there is faster is because there only gives back plain text. So it's a lot easier on the system to just spit out plain text and instead of full-sized objects. And Robocopy, well, Robocopy is amazing, so that's definitely the fastest. Another advantage of Robocopy is if you've ever run into the problem that Windows tells you that your system path is too long because it's more than 200, 240 or 256 characters. Robocopy can help you out with that and actually delete the files that are longer or actually copy them out if you need them. So it's a useful tool and it's available on any system. I think from 2008 it came bundled with the OS. In 2003 you still had to install it as a separate install. Cool. So this is a way to increase the performance, and you do that by avoiding using PowerShell objects and just using existing tools. Moving on, let's see. So another one, not so much performance. So if you do get ChildItem my profile, you get all the objects. But if we use the match parameter and we want to match a specific folder, my documents for example, I have to escape all the backslash because when you use the match parameter, everything is going to, the backslash character is an escape character. So you need to escape the escape character, and if you don't know about this, you end up not matching what you think you are matching when you're working with a file system. So you can solve that by just doing //, which is a bit of a hassle, but I guess you could teach yourself to do that. So if you run this now, we can see we get my documents back. Another way of doing this is we can use Gadget Escape, and I'll just execute that part. And we can see it escapes it for us. So in this case, it just escapes the backslash characters, but we can use this to escape anything we want, just by using the escape method. So if we put this all together, and just execute the whole line, you can see we now have an easier way of doing this. Last one about regular expressions before we move on to formatting. So we have a bunch of code here. So there's a couple of characters. We don't want the characters. We want to catch the pattern, and we want to catch we want this, we want this, we want this, we want this. So what we can do is we can create matching groups with the regular expression, and we can have it match on line break. So if we put all of this together, and this is very nice for matching stuff in large data sets when you need to have the context and you don't want to use select string or you pipe it to select string. You can use this one, and we can see, take a look at the matches. We get all the parameters, and because matches is a hash table, it's not ordered, but we still have all the data we want. And we have the different matching groups. Does that make sense? I mean, the regular expression does probably not make sense, but everything will be up on GitHub. You can just use it as is, and you don't have to think too much about it. Basically, you find something on Stack Overflow, copy paste it in your code, and then forget why it works. Because why would you want to understand everything? Cool, let's go back to the unicorn facts. Last thing, formatting. What can we do with formatting? So we have strings in PowerShell. We have the double quotation marks, single quotation marks. PowerShell is very friendly to us, so what it does, it also, if you have like the fancy quotation marks that are like upwards like that instead of normal quotation marks, it will also understand those and interpret those as proper quotation marks. We can use here strings. We can use the format operator to convert an integer to hexadecimal. We can use regular expressions, and we can use .NET methods and classes to format our data and make it look pretty. I already used the Gadget Escape in order to escape all the characters that are special characters in regular expressions. And before we move on, I thought the unicorn was coming up. So how can you line break your code? Where do you use brackets? How can you use splatting? Does everyone know what splatting is? See a lot of nodding. Cool. I see. It will be in the demo.
Okay. Yeah.
So the last T-shirt is going to be given away.
True.
You hacked the contest. I mean, it was 50% chance. Well, do tell me more. Why did the Pope buy a unicorn horn?
I don't want
So yeah, it was in fact true. The Germans, of course, they sold the Pope a unicorn horn, and he paid 18,000 pounds for it. I tried to convert it to nowadays currency, but the inflation calculators I found didn't want to go back further than 1800. So if it was 1800, it would be millions of pounds already. But yeah, since it was 1500, billions?
Sounds
Trillions?
like a gap in the market to me.
Yeah, unicorn horns were very big in the 1500s. Cool. So those are the questions. I'll jump back to that one in a second. So formatting. I'll just jump into creating a new AD user. So if you want to create a new AD user, we can use the new AD user commandlet. And you might find that when you run this, you get a very long command. What I don't like is scrolling to the right when I'm reading my code, because you're always going to scroll vertically. Some of us have a mouse that have like the button that can go to the right. Nice if you have it. I don't have a mouse like that. If I would ever build a cloud platform, I would never make it scroll to the right. So another way we can do this, and one we can often see, is we have new AD user here, and I'll zoom in. You can see we can use the backtick characters to go to the next line without breaking the flow of the command. Is this a good idea? Why is it not a good idea? So what backtick does, I heard white space at the end. So what backtick does, it just escapes the next character. You can also write special characters this way. You can do like a new line or a tab, stuff like that. You can even make your console make sound if you want to, but I don't have the sound plugged in. So if you put a space behind it, your whole command will break. And the thing about spaces is you can't see them. But other than that, you end up with neatly formatted code. It's very nice for demos or for blog posts because you can show the code in an easy way. But of course, there's a better way to do this. And that is, once again, our big friend hash tables. So we can create a hash table. We can put all the parameter names in there as the keys. And the values we put behind there. In the values, the only thing you need to know, as long as it's strings or integers, it's simple. But if you use a switch parameter in your command, then you have to specify either true if it's there, and you don't have to specify it if it's false, because it's a switch parameter. Its absence makes it false. So we have 5 minutes left, and I'm the one standing between you guys and lunch. So I'm going to leave it up to you guys instead of up to me, how much time we're going to spend in here before lunch. I have a catch box. I have t-shirts. Any questions about the code, presentation? Yes. Shane.
I got two, but it depends if you're willing to actually code in the demo.
Yeah, I can code.
Yeah.
No problem.
it was mentioned that the new constructor for PS custom objects is faster.
Yeah.
Would you have any examples of that? Or
Yeah, I can do that, but I'll do that after people go to lunch. Then anyone who wants to stay can see the performance difference in that one. Just pass on the microphone to whoever wants to ask a question. Anyone else? Okay, in that case, thank you for being here. I hope it was useful. There's feedback forms in the front. You can fill them out during lunch. There's stickers here that are for everyone. And for the people that answer the questions correctly or hacked my contest, you can get a t-shirt. Thank you for your time.